we will have a conversation with him on that. But while we have a little bit of time, if you guys dig this content, you find yourself coming back here often, hit that like button, slam into it with all of the power that your body can come up with. Also, hit the notification bell. I do interviews all sorts of day and night. I am an insomniac, so real men can't sleep. Real men do the news, even if it's 2 in the morning, whenever it strikes my fancy. So definitely hit the notification bell. If you guys really dig this content, you can support this content through PayPal or Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chat or Super Stickers. All stickers or chats will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. And by the way, we have new family members. And I want to thank all of you who've joined the Thomas family. You guys help support the show. You help keep this content running. And I damn appreciate you all for doing so. Let me bring in my guests. We're joined with the one and only, the man of the hour, Koffi Kouakou. He's an Africa analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Man, welcome back. How you doing, Koffi?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Good
man, I am glad
to you.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you, man. I always enjoy bringing you on. We often don't get the opportunity to hear about what's taking place in Africa. It's a big continent, and a lot of stuff goes on. It's just outside of our eye shot. So I definitely always like to touch base to figure out where things stand and where things are. The latest news that I heard is that the French have packed their bags up and left Chad. I watched them leave and, disrepute, and pack their stuff and go. What's going on with this? So Chad is the latest country to kick out the French. Koffi, can you hear me?
Yes, this is really good news. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I think the line is a bit not quite good, but on my side, it looks like it's good. But I can hear you very well. Now, this is, I think, for a new year, end of the year news, it's quite very good because it really fits into what I call, breaking the hegemony of the echo chamber. Breaking that echo chamber hegemony of the French in West Africa, at least on many of these African countries. And it's really good news. But they're living in drip. They're not living quickly enough for many of us. And hopefully, if they're living in droves, it'll be a good thing because I think their foreign and external interferences into African politics has been a total disaster to the evolution of the continent in many ways. I must say that. So what I've done is, given that, I think probably you can also talk about what I call the year of resilience in Africa. And that year of resilience, really, I got to give credit to 3 Sahelian countries. As you know, you and I have been talking about these, and I keep saying we need to watch this sort of wave that's coming up from Mali, Burkina Faso, and then Niger. And they've done a tremendous job. I was looking at my person of the year. I struggled a bit to nominate one, but one that emerged very quickly for me is President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh, I thought you were. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had finished the sentence.
Can you hear me?
Now, why do you nominate him? Okay. He mentioned that his line was a little dodgy, and we will come back to him when his line gets right. Africa, look, the reason I cover Africa is because I have to be honest, I'm fascinated by it. When the coups took place, where the hunters came into power in the Sahel states, there was outrage in the U.S. Oh my God, these military dictators got into power. And, the reality of it is you had a system that was put in place where Western countries, France, the U.S., were able to exert a certain amount of power over those governments that they were calling democracies. And the fact of the matter is, from their point of view, there was no way in order to, let's say, exert or take that control back short of getting those people out. And so you had a mass uprising. It's not like in Ukraine where half of the country is ethnic Russian Ukrainians, the other half is more geared towards the West, and you get the Western countries backing a band of terrorists to overthrow the government. It wasn't that. It was a mass uprising of resistance against imperialistic forces intervening into the politics of the country and calling it a democracy. When those juntas, if you want to call it that, kicked those, let's say, various leaders out, the public applauded. The public agreed. And so that's what he's referring to. Koffi, welcome back. I was just giving a slight update or a slight summary of what was taking place in regards to the Sahel states as you were going into it. Please continue. You mentioned that one of those leaders was meant to be like, if you had to give an award to him, he deserved it. Who is the leader? What country does he? Person of the year. Thank you. What country does he lead?
Ibrahim Traore. Ibrahim Traore, young president, 36 years old, and really great. In fact, next March he's turning 37, and he's shown an incredible leadership. It's not just that people hate the military. There's this sense that every time the military takes over, it's going to be a disorder. Of course, the history of Africa has taught us that. But I think this time there's something different, something quite special that the military are not really doing it, at least for those three countries I've mentioned, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They have a sense of Pan-Africanism and then a sense of coming together to be able to get rid, as I said again, to break the echo chambers of hegemony of the French and imperialism. And it's a new wave of decolonization. And, you know, I said the year of resilience because the president of Mali, Assimi Goïta, and then Ibrahim Traore have gone through foil coup d'etats, 9 and 9 on each side. This is just unbelievable. And they're still alive. And
wait. I have to stop you on that. Did you say they've endured 9 coup d'etat attempts, meaning 9 times people have tried to overthrow them and they've been able to beat attempts?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, they have. This is incredible. And that's one of the reasons I call it the year of resilience. And they are making things happening like never before. In less than 2 years, those two young presidents, Mali, for example, Mali's managed to pay off its debt to the IMF. Burkina Faso is going to be doing the same thing. And we've never seen this before under the so-called democratic, elected president in those countries. So this is something extraordinary to pay attention to this wave. And then as part of that, for me, that awakening for the military, which is in Burkina Faso, many people are saying, which it may be a bit true, Ibrahim Traore is channeling the spirit of Thomas Sankara, whom I'm sure you know about, who is the leader, the sort of revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, military revolutionary leader who was killed. But Ibrahim Traore is sort of channeling him in a certain degree, but he's doing it in a way that's just, bringing a lot of young people in West Africa together. It's not easy, but really, you got to give him huge credit, Thomas.
I'm impressed. I mean, he's been able to take over a political apparatus and effectively use it. And how was he able to pay off the loans for the IMF? Because you're right. Normally it's like, oh, we can't do anything. And so now we have to sell our water system or sell out or sell whatever resource to whoever. How were they able to pay off the loan that quickly after they took power?
Well, this is exactly the myth that we've heard so many times about those countries being poor. And in fact, those countries are not poor. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, they're so rich that month's revenue could pay off all their debts right away. And so what he's managed to do, especially in Mali, I'm taking the case of Mali first, and then I'm going to go to Burkina Faso. Mali's been able to pay, I think it was 300 million and a little bit over to the IMF and they're getting money from using and paid tax resource companies we now call them resource company, but in the old days we called them mining companies. And one of them, which I don't know if I should say the name, but anyway, it's run by South African CEO. So the Malian government told him, look, here are the books for a couple of decades or so, 10 or 15 years, you haven't paid your taxes and back taxes and so forth. And as you know, there's also this whole idea about illicit flows, big issues that drive money, countries out of the countries. And so they just grabbed them and they said, well, if you don't, you're not going out of this jail. And guess what? He was supposed to pay 500 million US dollars. A week later, and I think the Malian government used part of that money to pay off their debt with the IMF. Incredible.
He owed 500. He owed that much in taxes, meaning he had skated on paying taxes to the tune of $500 million, and the previous government didn't do anything about it.
Of course they didn't, because most of them were bought. But let's give it the weight it deserve that money. And so let's say $500 million. $500 million. This is a lot of money. And this money was sitting there and they were not paying. Same thing is now happening in Burkina Faso, where the Burkina government just grabbed the CEOs of these mining companies and told them, look, you're going to pay 160 million US dollars, or we're not letting you go. Guess what? They paid up. So this whole idea of resource sovereignty is really the key. Remember, you and I have been talking about this for the past almost, I think, 2 years, and it's so critical. If not only collected properly with taxes or systems that work for revenues, but also used well, those countries are not poor. They're some of the wealthiest in the world. Mali's got gold, lithium, rare earth. Same for Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is first producer of gold in Africa. I mean, it's just unbelievable. We just completed building a gold refinery, which is going to be really good for them. Help them to control at least part of that value chain around gold mining.
You know what's sad about that? Because you're right. And I've heard this argument many times before. There's something to be said for this kind of economic might. But the reality of it is you can't eat your dollars. Things boil down to resources. And I think we found that in the war in Ukraine, where the West is like, well, we have all of this financial might. We have all of these financial industries. We're going to crush the ruble. We're going to destroy the Russian economy. And come to find out, regardless of what you think about Russia, people need oil, people need grain, people need, the resources that they have at their disposal, and they're a resource superpower. And it was basically, it allowed that government to exist despite all of the might that was being availed against it from the NATO nations. And truth be told, Africa as a continent is astonishingly rich. I mean, it's the reason why all of these Europeans were colonizing it in the first place, the materials and everything else that they can get out the country. And that's what they've been doing, extracting value out of Africa without letting that value go to the Africans that are in the country or the continent itself. And so, are we looking at a new Africa that is aware of that and is starting to take this kind of point of view of, hey, we actually do have resources that we can use to back our own economic self-interest. And we're going to exploit those resources every bit as much as Europeans were exploiting those resources. That money is going to come and stay in Africa from here on out. Is that what we're looking at? And something that effectively started as a junta that they were doing everything in their power to get rid of is now used as an example for the rest of Africa. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, Jamal. Absolutely. And I just insist on the term absolutely. It's not just the fact that they're now becoming aware, because these ideas have been there since the 60s anyway, with Kwame Nkrumah, President Patrice Lumumba, all these revolutionary groups, and including the African National Congress in South Africa, and so forth and so forth. But what is more important now that there's a deepening realization, especially I think another story that we haven't spent much time, and we should when we get time, to look at the very powerful, strong, and growing role of African awakened influencers on social media, for example. They've been some of the most powerful contributors to awakening the minds and then soul of many Africans about what it means, first of all, to be African. Second, to be aware that, in fact, the continent is so wealthy. It's not a poor continent. When the World Bank writes a report to say that, Africans are surviving on a $2 a day. I mean, where in the world did they get that kind of indicator, that misleading indicators, when tons of goals are running to these countries daily, weekly, monthly, every year? And so it's important. So most of these awakening is happening deeply daily. And the media, social media has been playing a role. The growth of many of these people on the internet is just astounding and extraordinary. People are just listening to them. Millions of them are picking alternative sources of information. They're not listening to Radio France International much anymore, nor the BBC anymore. These are losing their strength, even including Voice of America. No wonder the effect has been so powerful, including, of course, the support of Sputnik International, and then RT itself. These are the channels of awakening people are listening to in English and French and in Swahili, whatever. And I think there hasn't been much work around this. Is a missing story. In fact, you were asking your earlier guest what was missing. For me, that will be that one. But the other missing story that hasn't been covered is the extraordinary role of Russia in helping secure and making Africans feel like the security is negotiable. They should strengthen that security before starting to do anything else. Of course, economics is important. And Russia's role has been dismissed, played out, underplayed. Is playing a powerful role right now in awakening and supporting most of these governments in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and now it's moving to Chad. And you'll see more and more. There are about 34, 35 African countries now building strong relationship with African nations. And of course, you'll hear the dismissal in, global Western media. So we have to be careful. They're playing a powerful role. And I think Russia will play more of that role in terms of security. And China will continue to play its role on the economic security side. And the combination of these two are so powerful. It will help to do what I call the second wave of decolonization of Africa.
I agree with you. Because it comes across, even if you look at BRICS in and of itself, it looks like Russia and China are like an anchor together with many of the other countries. I'm not going to call them satellites because, the multipolarity, these countries are equal. But from the standpoint of either economic or, for that matter, military might or industrial might, the combination of the two are astonishingly powerful when you think about it. And so if you're looking for a new order of things, or let's say something to contest this kind of Western-centric slant that the world has, those two countries have provided a backbone in a way that I haven't necessarily seen in my lifetime. And yeah, Russia made a play for Africa, and so did China. When I was in Kenya, for example, there are casinos all over the place, including Chinese-specific casinos, because there are so many Chinese businessmen and diplomats in the country that they wanted somewhere where they could basically cut loose. And so they would have casinos that were considered Chinese casinos. And I would imagine that's taking place all over Africa. And I remember J.D. Vance was making a speech, and he says when China goes places, it builds bridges and roads and power plants. and we build military bases, and we have to be able to do something different in those countries, or we're going to lose those countries. He's right. He's right. They're losing those countries because at the end of the day, what people really want is not this kind of war brought to their country. They, it's the understanding that if you want to prevent war, if you want to prevent chaos, you need a certain level of economic stability to do so. Meaning, yeah, you're going to get people who are terrorists if they don't necessarily believe they have any buy-in to the country and they don't see a future within the country. But if you have roads, bridges, jobs, an economy, this notion of an ability to make some level of life for yourself, you are less inclined to do that. That's just kind of a theory of crime, even in the US. And so it's good to see that let's say that ecosystem is starting to grow and develop, where Africa is getting this kind of sense of itself, where they're able to kind of look inward to a global Africa. That's fantastic. It's fascinating because I get this sense that Africa is going to play a pivotal role coming up in whatever this new norm is, where the world is trying to figure out what it's ultimately going to be. From the standpoint of security, I also agree with you on that. If it doesn't matter how smart I am, if you can take my lunch money, my intelligence is not really going to help me. And, the US has zero issue with using terrorists to knock over. It was true, right? It's like the smartest man alive to get punched in the nose. Like, it
That's right.
requires a certain level of security, especially consider. I mean, you can look at Syria. Syria is a great example. The US had used terrorists, jihadists, in order to try to knock over that government going all the way back since George Bush. And they finally were able to accomplish it out of the blue in order to do so. And there are many African countries that have pointed out they believe that France, the US, are using terrorism to antagonize those countries to make the government look like it can't do the job of protecting the citizens of that country, and hence Russian security. Give me your take on this notion of Russian security. How is it working? How has it integrated itself into the various countries, specifically the Sahel states?
Well, this is a really important issue, and I think you and I have just sort of put it out very well. There's a definite and absolute balance between regular defense, physical security, sovereign security, where military and defense plays a role, and then economic security as well. You need to balance it out. You can't just move on one end only. And well balanced, history has told us that governments will manage to do that, or leaders will manage to do that, are more secure and can develop the countries going forward. And has proven it. Russia is now proving it. And people are watching and looking at that. So they're trying to export that. Russia especially is trying to export that into Africa. In fact, an untold story is Russia's move into the Central African Republic about 10 years ago. And people don't know that this is where things really started well. Although Russia has a history with many African countries, but modern recent African history tells us that this is where Russia's moved into with the Wagner Group in the Central African Republic to protect the newly elected president, Touadéra, and then from there built up a security fence around him and slowly managed to secure him in his position today secured. But of course, people are not quite happy with what he's trying to do. He's trying to bring the French back again. And people say, be careful. But Russia was very successful, and Russia exported that to Mali. And the young president of Mali, Assimi Goïta, saw it and said, I'm going to call up on the Russian. And Russia and Mali, or at least the former Soviet Union and Mali, had a very long-standing partnership for many, many, many years. And they built up on it, and Mali has been receiving solid security. I mean, I'm talking about serious security to protect drones, satellite data, insight and information, early intelligence detection, anticipatory, if you want, surveillance of the terrorists in the northern part of Mali. Remember, Mali is a huge country, about 1 million something square kilometers, same as also Niger. So it's not an easy country to secure, given also not the geography, but also the region, that the Sahel is not an easy place to really police. But they've managed to now have control over the country. And what they're finding, and what we know is that in fact the northern part of Mali, that bigger chunk of Mali that's next to Algeria, is full of gold and full of oil and gas. Some of the most incredible reserves are there. Deposit first. And so people are now vying and looking at this. Same for Burkina Faso and Niger. And so the secure them physically, you have no gain. But also by securing them, you need to feed your own people, because people are not going to live on on talks and death, so forth. So you got to do both of them. I think by striking a partnership, a sensible partnership with Russia, I think Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are now finding a way to not only express themselves better, but also attempt to govern the country better, having the security rights, having security also right, but also to give a new spirit to the country, which is not easy, because you still have other countries like France still attempting to topple the government, but also feeding, internal division and so forth. I think this is a good partnership to start with. And I think many African countries should follow that model to strengthen the security, defense area, internal securities as well as external. But at the same time, they should also look to China to provide some economic security and trading, to buy cheap goods and then feed their countries, but also feed themselves at home. It's not just depending on the outside. So Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger are just doing just that. An incredible.
I guess my thought is,
incredible.
Yes, I agree with you about the feeding your people, obviously, right? I guess my thought is, though, it requires, maybe in the very beginning, it requires, like you said, the relationships in order to even build the industry, in order to extract the resources, in order to be able to do that going forward. You made one more point before I get to that. You made the point of saying France is stirring up internal divisions in the country. Explain how that works. Like, what are they doing? They're still intruding into the politics of the various Sahel states.
I mean, one simple example, and this is not my words, but the words of the president of Burkina Faso and also Mali, especially Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traore has been accusing d'Ivoire, at least the president of Cote d'Ivoire and his government, Alassane Ouattara, of being a proxy to the French. First of all, organizing the sort of dissidents of these two countries and creating refuge for them in the southern part of Cote d'Ivoire. And then with not only money, but strategies, but also disinformation strategies to be able to line the government of these two countries, including Niger, by the way. And so the president, in fact, it was last week again, he's been making the same case. Many people, or at least a couple of groups, were caught with $1 billion of French CFA, attempting to corrupt the military to topple President Ibrahim Traore, and they were caught red-handed, and all of that. And you could see, I mean, the evidence is so clear. Not only they were caught, but also four, what's called the French spying agency, DGSE, were caught in Burkina Faso a year they'd been there. And of course, Ibrahim Traore and his government didn't want to release them. They were only released because the government of the King of Morocco intervened to really make a case. And in fact, another subject that you and I, when we get time, we should discuss is a growing role of Morocco, not only investment, but security and all sort of industrial stuff in West Africa. And Morocco is becoming a powerful hegemon in that place. So they managed to to release those four spies. And it's not just only those spies. You have groups of terrorists also coming from Cote d'Ivoire, part of Burkina Faso, and attacking the civilians in the southern part and killing them and then running back to Cote d'Ivoire. But the Burkinabe military and soldiers cannot do anything. So these are the kind of skirmishes and continuous provocations, deep ways to undermine those governments that's playing out. And the French are just sitting and pretending that nothing to do with it. However, in fact, one of the former French generals, retired general, he made it clear many months ago in the middle, I think it was in July or September, that they are now planning a 30-year back, serious to be back in the former colonies. I mean, that should send a signal to everybody that the French are not just sitting duck, they are doing something. And they're losing big time. If they lose all these countries they used to colonize, France will become nothing.
Cote d'Ivoire, they don't see the writing on the wall themselves. Meaning, is there anything internal to the country that says all of these other countries are throwing off the yoke of French imperialism? Maybe we should do the same thing. I mean, if it's especially if they're seeing there's some kind of economic, financial, industrial, or for that matter, trade relationship benefits that these countries in the Sahel states have received from throwing off the yoke of French oppression, I'm going to call it in that way, or imperialistic control. Why does Cote d'Ivoire do that? I mean, what are they getting out of it? And is there a fervor in the population itself to follow the Sahel